You're listening to the Franchise Freedom Podcast with Giuseppe Grammatico.
Okay, and welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, your franchise guide. And today we have a very special guest. Today we are speaking with my good friend, Tara Thomas. A little bit about Tara. Tara had joined the franchise industry more than 20 years ago. With her experience in franchise development and owning her own franchise, she brings a unique perspective to her role as a senior funding consultant with FranFund. She has firsthand experience with the challenges faced by both franchisees as well as franchisors, and how the right funding partner can benefit both parties. She is dedicated to helping people start or grow their business by providing them with the funding options that make the most sense for their specific situation. Tara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Giuseppe. I'm happy to be here.
This is great. I jokingly said before the show that this is a great show. I'm getting asked a lot of funding questions. So before I get into trouble by giving the wrong advice, which I've known to accidentally make a mistake or leave something out, we'll record this and I can use this as a resource as well.
That's perfect that you can use it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks again for being on the show. If you can give the audience a little bit about, how you got into the role you're in today. A lot of people have been, researching franchises and startups, not sure exactly where to start. So if you can give us a little bit of how you got into FranFund and
Sure.
a little bit about that journey, including, what franchise you were involved with.
Yeah. So my journey in franchising began in 1999 when I started working for a pretty well-known franchise, Two Men in a Truck. And it's a moving company. And I worked there, actually started out as a customer service representative, scheduling moves, answering the phones. And then I moved up to office manager. I worked at a couple of different franchise locations as management, and then actually worked for the corporate location for a few years doing training and development. And I loved that position and had the opportunity to buy a franchise that was not very far from where I grew up in Michigan. So I owned that. I only had it for about 2 years before I knew I was going to be moving, because moving to where my husband and I currently live, and we were going to be starting a family. And I knew for me personally that I didn't have the capacity to both run that business the way I wanted to and have infant children. So I was super blessed to be able to call a neighboring franchisee that was a friend and make a pretty simple transaction. So sold my franchise, but I loved that business, loved that concept and that brand. And then kind of got into some other sales management for a few years and had some friends that worked at FranFund. And when this became available, they said, hey, why don't you get back into this side of franchising? So I've been with FranFund now for about 3 years and really just love being on this side and helping people to achieve their dreams of small business ownership by helping them with their funding solutions.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure working together. I know funding, there's a lot of moving parts and things to know. So it sounds like you've definitely had some experience, and that seems to be the, when it comes to funding and FranFund offering all these solutions, it's I don't know if it's a stumbling block, but people tend to wait a little bit too long to look at this from our conversations and making a decision on a franchise and then deciding to look at funding. And at that point, it's maybe a 2 or 3 month process from start to finish. So, when is a good time to start? I'm looking at a franchise. So I'm
Sure.
in New Jersey looking at a franchise. And when do I start looking at funding? When do you normally recommend that?
I think as early as possible, to be honest with you, because first of all, our service is on the front end. It's an educational conversation. It's a consultative approach, just like what you offer, Giuseppe. So, it's not unusual that our conversations will help candidates and prospective franchisees to really realize what they might be able to afford or qualify for. So you don't go out and buy a house before you get pre-approved for a mortgage and know what you qualify for. So it's not unusual that somebody will say, well, wait, I haven't even talked to anybody. I want to make sure, I want to get down and have all these conversations with a franchisor. Right. And I hate to say it, but just to be transparent, it would be unfortunate for everybody involved if you're talking to a franchisor looking at a concept that you can't afford. or that you're not able to buy into. So why not get that, and get a good warm fuzzy for yourself and just be able to realize, okay, I've been pre-approved, or I know I have this path for funding moving forward. So now I can have that comfort in having these conversations with franchisors.
Great. So it's not just me saying that. So it's coming directly from Tara, which I love. Though, everyone's going to listen to you now. I jokingly say it's true. And I actually stole that line from you. I always say when you're looking at buying a home, you need a budget. You need a starting point. You can't just look at $5 million homes. You need to have some resources, some capital, a down payment at minimum. And I think it's a great exercise too to get people's financials in order, because I've noticed when I've asked people to get their financials in order, they're telling me how much they have in their checking and savings account, and they assume, that they, why include retirement? I can't use retirement, and I tell them, don't assume anything. Retirement is still an asset. Put together your assets and liabilities. We'll look at net worth and things like that, and I'm sure we'll get into more of that. But I think that's another thing with part of the education process is just saying, give me everything, and then we'll have that conversation and look at all your options. We're not just a one solution shop, and we just do one thing all day long. So, which is nice. So if you can talk a little bit about, and why we work so closely together at FranFund, the service you offer. So you offer funding solutions. So if you can talk a little bit more about that. So what does that truly mean? Do you just, is it just loans that you offer? Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So we offer a couple of different funding solutions in-house. So FranFund, we are not a bank or a direct lending institution, but we do help our clients to obtain SBA loans. So we have a team of folks in-house that actually focus their full-time efforts on helping clients to obtain SBA loans. So we help them package their loans. So things like templates for business plans, financial projections, performance, all of the documentation that lenders will require. And we've networked with these lenders across the country that we've been able to educate on the franchise brands that we work with. So that's where it's typically a little bit more efficient and less painful than you walking into your local bank and saying, hey, I want to start this business.
Right.
We also facilitate a program that's often referred to as the 401k rollover, or ROBS, ROBS. And ROB stands for Rollover for Business Startup. And that's a plan that's been around, actually a product that's been around since the 70s. And it allows you to invest retirement savings into your business without income tax or early withdrawal penalty. So it's not unusual that I do talk to clients that had no idea that this existed, that this strategy existed, and love the opportunity to capitalize on pre-tax dollars while investing in their own business. And so many of our clients have actually found that they're able to get a better return on investment while they're investing into their own business versus that traditional market. But it's not unusual if we talk about, we don't facilitate a home equity line of credit, but if a HELOC makes sense, or equipment leasing, or unsecured financing, a portfolio loan against securities. So really, we want to make sure that it's the best funding strategy for that candidate and their long-term success, whether or not it's something we facilitate or not.
Right. And that's great. It's a full approach to that. So each person that you're speaking with is getting an unbiased kind of, these are all your options, whether you facilitate it or not, but you can go this route. When I always have a follow-up with the candidates that we send over, and they'll ask me, what do I think? Mm-hmm. And they go, well, it's in my opinion, easy to figure out what may cost you less in the long run, but ultimately what's the right fit for you. And someone was, I think, in between a ROBS plan, using their own money and taking out a loan. And I said, well, this is your money. You're not going to have a note payment you have to pay every month versus the loan, and there's interest. And what are you more comfortable with? Some people are just not comfortable taking their money out of retirement. So I tell people it's not just, you have to look at the numbers, but you have to see what you're most comfortable with, if that makes sense. Am I explaining that right?
No, I would agree. People ask me that all the time. They say, well, what do you think is best? Right. What would you do? And it's like, I'm not going to tell you that, especially if somebody can qualify for an SBA loan and they have retirement. So some people say that they'd rather use somebody else's money, which, it's somebody else's money on the front end, but you're always paying it back with interest and fees. So it's still your money in the long run.
Right.
Or, I have people who are very debt averse. They don't like the idea of taking on the debt. And if they can self-fund with Rob's, they don't have the overhead of the monthly loan payment, so their business can cash flow faster. So sometimes, and it's also not unusual, I will say, that it's a combination of those two. So maybe you only have $200,000 in your retirement and you're looking at a $500,000 total project cost. As you mentioned earlier, the bank, if you're looking to borrow, they need cash injection. You have to have skin in the game.
Right.
So you can use the Rob strategy for the cash injection to obtain the SBA loan. Or maybe if you're looking at multiple territories, multiple units. That's where we're often seeing a combination of those two being used together.
Okay. That's also good to know. And that's what most people are, you don't have to just decide on one. You can use a combination. Someone wants an overview. What do you charge for a consult to look at options?
Consult is $0.0. So you never pay any fee to us until you're ready to engage in our services. So it's not unusual. Sometimes I talk to people who are maybe a little bit further down the path and it's only 1 or 2 calls, where some people I talk to them for 2 or 3 months, before they're making that decision. Our loan consultation service is $2,500 regardless of how much money is borrowed. Our pre-approval process itself is absolutely free of charge. So for you to get a hard pre-approval in writing, for you to be able to present to franchisors, which, as you know, Giuseppe, is oftentimes required before you participate in a discovery day or a meet the team day. So there's never any cost until you say, hey, I want to move forward with this small business and I want to work with FranFund to help me to obtain my loan. That's when the client can choose to engage in our services. That is for the lending side of things. On the Rob strategy, it's a little bit different because there's a little bit more of a value add, because we're actually creating their C corporation for them, doing the articles of incorporation, covering state filing fees, setting up bylaws, meeting minutes, issuing stock certificates, and setting up a retirement plan. So that strategy upfront has a one-time business expense of $4,795. And on that service, we do offer a veteran discount to our veteran clients, and that is $3,995.
And today is May 27, 21. So meaning if this listen down the road, always double check and ask if anything has changed.
I can tell you, and yes, I do. I surely appreciate that. But just as like an FYI for clients that might be like, those prices have been the same for years.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
Until state agencies start changing costs for those types of things or something like that. So it's been fairly consistent.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Let's see. People had candidates that we're sending over, we're in the beginning stages. Maybe it's a first or a second call. What should someone's looking at a franchise or a business. There's a lot going on, right? They're depending if there's partners, family members involved. It's, just the stress, the excitement, trying to figure out the brands and doing the due diligence. So there's a lot going on. So things sometimes are missed. So we talked about funding, the sooner the better, right? Maybe that's maybe just after the first conversation, doing an intro. What's a good, not strategy, but exercise that people should be doing maybe before speaking with you, as far as getting their finances in order? What do you recommend as far as kind of, should they have all their statements and balances together? What do you recommend before your initial call?
It's always good to know kind of, I think you mentioned earlier, doing that exercise of what are your assets and your liabilities, figuring out that net worth. Before they have a conversation with me, a client, I do have them complete a very high level brief financial questionnaire. It's in ranges. So I'm going to say, how much do you have in savings and checking? And it can be between 25 and 50,000, 50 and 100, 200,000 or greater, whatever it is. But knowing that, if you're ever looking at any type of lending or financing, credit score is going to be important. Make sure you don't even have a $25 medical collection out there or a late credit card payment. That's just going to affect your credit history and your credit score. So that's never going to be good if you're looking at financing. The good thing with the ROB strategy is none of those types of factors come into effect. So your credit score, outside income, whether or not you own a home, it doesn't matter. It's just whether or not you choose to invest your retirement savings that way.
And are there any other requirements on the ROBs? Is there you had talked about the fees. Is there a certain amount? I believe we discussed.
So because of the fee that I, discussed, and then there are some ongoing administration fees because there's a real retirement plan that's involved in that, that the client will participate in and contribute to and offer to eligible W-2 employees. With the fees associated, it doesn't make sense to use that strategy if you're investing less than $50,000. So $50,000 is the minimum to make that strategy worthwhile, and it can be up to the amount that you have in your retirement. So I have facilitated this program for $50,000, and I've done it, upwards of $1 million. It really just depends. It's the candidate's choice. In that strategy, there's so many different types of retirement plans that can be used. So what cannot be used is a shorter list, but typically employers do not allow you to access funds while still employed. So if it is your current employer plan, it is likely not eligible for the program. And then if you have funds that are very specifically in a Roth IRA, so those are post-tax contributions in a Roth IRA, those are not eligible for the plan. But if it's a previous employer 401k, 403b, 457, if you were in the military and you have a TSP, or you put these funds into a traditional or rollover IRA, all of those or any combination of those would be eligible for the ROB strategy.
And if you, and I'm sorry, you had mentioned a few things. So if I keeping my job, so I have my current employer's 401k, just say I have 200,000, but 100 of it was from a previous employer that was rolled in there. Am I able to access any of that money?
That is a good question. So unfortunately, there's not a hard, fast answer to that. It's possibly, oftentimes I find the answer is yes, but each employer plan is written differently, Giuseppe. So what I always do is, and a lot of times if I have clients that are very specifically interested in ROBs, and they didn't know that their funds with their current employer couldn't be used, I'll ask that question. Hey, did you contribute all of these while you were working with your current employer? Did you roll some in from a previous? And if they did, I always advise them to call their current custodian and ask the question, hey, can I roll those funds out while still employed? And oftentimes those previous employer funds that were rolled in are accessible. So you bring up a really great point there.
Yeah, those are the things that I missed. These are the details that we're getting.
Those are the things that might have happened to some of our clients, and we figure that out along the way.
Yeah, this is all the things I forgot to mention on my last couple of calls. So it's just a recording. We're gonna loop it. We're just gonna play it over and over.
There you go.
It's a lot of little things, and not for today, but when and other factors, bankruptcies and things like that affect certain types of loans that you're looking at. So. I guess given how far back they go. So there's a lot. So I guess bring everything to the table is, kind of when I work with someone and, what are your thoughts? Who's involved? Let's look at everything. We bring everyone to the table. Same on the financials. Let's take a look at everything. If you have outside investments, let's take a holistic approach and let's gather everything together and make that, make the best informed decision. But ultimately it's whatever you're most comfortable with. So.
Yeah. And if you're going to have business partners, it is good to have that on our conversations. If it's an SBA loan, they're likely going to need to sign with you. If you're using the ROBs, you can also have partners. And, sometimes I also talk to clients that are so close, but maybe they're just not close enough to getting there on their own. So sometimes I'll suggest the possibility of a partner or a guarantor, somebody that maybe can bring additional cash or liquidity or whatever that borrower is lacking to the table.
That's great. No, that's really good to know. What didn't we touch on? We could be talking about funding for hours because
I was just going to say we can talk for a long time. I guess one other thing, one of the things that I'll touch on if we're talking about SBA lending, there's a couple of different loans that can be used when you're talking about startups, specifically kind of in the franchise space, but often in franchise we refer to something as an SBA Express loan. Those loans, SBA Express or small loans, they max out at $150,000 borrowed, and they're really specifically geared towards service-based businesses that can be operated from a home or a small office space, but it doesn't fund any build out or construction. So it's not really a great fit for like a brick and mortar opportunity. Or we go a traditional SBA 7A loan. Today, most lenders are really interested in lending $200,000 or more, and it goes all the way up to $5 million. So it covers a pretty large amount, but their interest rates and terms are the same. Typically, you're looking at a 7 to 10 year term with no prepayment penalties, and interest rates are at prime plus 2 to 2.75. So you're looking at about 6% overall today. So again, sometimes in that initial conversation, I'll say, hey, are you leaning more towards a service-based business or a brick and mortar? And that's the reason I'm asking, so we can know. And sometimes too, a big difference between the two is, while any type of SBA loan, you're always signing a personal guarantee, saying that if for any reason that business cannot afford to make that monthly loan payment, that the borrower is personally responsible for that debt and securing it with any and all assets. However, that express loan doesn't actually require collateral. The 7A loan does, and they're most likely going to be looking at collateral such as real estate, where they're going to place a lien on the real estate owned, and the equity serves as collateral. So maybe somebody doesn't have enough equity or they don't own a home currently. Mm-hmm. That's where I could go back to you or the client and say, hey, then let's stick within these service-based businesses that are 150 or less. So again, getting back to having that conversation early to help you determine what you might be able to afford.
Right. And putting together a game plan, right? So if the plan is retail and it has to be retail, but the numbers are not there, putting together a plan, maybe it's a follow-up in 3 or 6 months, but where maybe the credit score has to come up, but even the monthly expense, we talk about liabilities, assets, and net worths and things like that, but just your monthly spend. And I'll tell people I work with, at the end of the day, it's a franchise, a startup, it's a business. So there's going to be some ramp up time. Some are going to be quicker than others, but figure out what your monthly expense is and what you have coming in. So if your spouse, your partner, whoever you're sharing the household with is working, does their salary, cover the mortgage and monthly expense? What are you short every month? Just so you can plan ahead and have that cash reserve to kind of get them through maybe the first 6 months of owning that business. So, do you help them put together a plan? Do you give kind of solid numbers as to where they need to be in the event?
We talk through that because actually, you just use 6 months. But if we're talking about SBA lending very specifically, the bank actually wants to see that you have enough outside income and or cash to cover the first 9 to 12 months. Just knowing that the business isn't going to make money on day one, that there's going to be a ramp up period, and banks are very conservative. So that's where outside income does become important. And I know sometimes that sounds weird and it's frustrating because people are saying, how am I supposed to have a full-time job and start a business? We both know there are businesses out there that can do that, and there are some that can't. But that's where, if you are married, spousal income is important. Maybe you have rental properties, that's income, so it can come from different avenues, but outside income does become important. Banks typically like a specific debt to income ratio of, maybe about 40 to 50%. So you're setting your clients up to be prepared for that is very important.
Yes, I agree. And that's, if the timing isn't right, it isn't right. And we always revisit, but we always kind of jokingly say, gotta decrease those expenses. And I know when I first started my business, we didn't eat out. I don't think for an entire year. It was home cooking. So we got to, it was a lot of YouTube and cooking, and all joking aside, you need to set, it took a little while for our business to get up and running. So my wife was working, but you still have monthly payments to make to the banks, and it wasn't easy, but we all get there.
I know. I think a lot of people, when they're starting a small business, and the goal always is, if maybe you're working in corporate America, to replace your salary, right? And I get that. But to achieve those dreams, a lot of times, I did, when I bought my franchise, I took a pay cut. I took a pretty decent pay cut to start that business and to own that business versus what I was making working at the franchisor at the corporate level. So, those are the things we have to give, and then it ramps up. And then obviously, so there is a little bit of give and take there. And, anytime that you're starting a new business, you just have to kind of account for that.
Yep, I agree. Same here. Definitely took a pay cut, but you have to factor everything in: the taxes, the growth.
Yep.
There's so many advantages. I always say I've never missed a soccer game in my entire life. Maybe it was late once or twice, but even became a soccer coach because I said these are the things that are most important. And if you put that stuff forward, you make the time, and a business definitely frees you up. So. Not always the right fit for everyone, but we definitely like to explore and give all options. Changing gears really quick. Interesting thing. Or I should say fun fact. You're related to someone famous. Is that correct?
Yes. Giuseppe asked me for this fun fact, and I said that my fun fact is getting boring because I use this everywhere. But Burt Reynolds is like my third cousin or something like that. So it's funny. My husband used to tease me and say, "You are not related to Burt Reynolds." And I was like, "Yes, no, really. He's like my grandmother's cousin, but I'm from Lansing, Michigan." So not that anybody would doubt me. I always said that too. I was like, why would you not that Burt Reynolds isn't cool, but I could pick way cooler things to lie about. But if you look it up, he is from Lansing, Michigan, and that's where I'm from originally.
So you actually knew him? Did you actually?
No, I've never met him, and no, unfortunately not. So see, it's not even as exciting.
Yeah, I was like, wow. I was like, I'm looking at the fact. I'm wondering if you guys actually got to hang out and do
things. I need to bring out my picture of the two of us together or something like that.
That's it, right?
No, what's funny? I think I didn't read the book, but I think he for a long time actually didn't claim that he was from Michigan. He said that he grew up somewhere else, and then when he was much older, said that I don't know. Interesting fact. Not that interesting.
Yeah. That's cool. I always like to. I always like to ask that. I've received some really interesting fun facts. I had someone on, Mark Titcomb from Floor Coverings, and we were talking. He's never lost a game of badminton. So it was so I called him out at the conference in July. I'm gonna challenge him. I'm gonna have to practice a little bit. So.
Yeah, that moves pretty fast, so that's interesting. I'll have to remember that the next time I talk to him.
He gave me a few secrets and pointers, so we'll see it. We'll see in Nashville. Anything else? I know we're coming across the 30-minute mark, and to be respectful of your time, anything we didn't cover? We covered a lot, and obviously, this is just a general overview.
Yeah.
And anyone I talk with, I try just to give an overview of what to expect, and I love to make introductions pretty much to anyone looking at a franchise. Is there anything that we talked about some common funding options and what Fran Fund does? Anything else that maybe we didn't touch on?
I mean, I think the only thing is that, if you're working with Giuseppe or somebody like Giuseppe, I mean, when you talk about funding, don't think you're going to start pulling my credit or it's a scary conversation. Again, it's educational. Even if it's not the right fit today, as he said, we're going to talk about what it's going to take to get there. We're happy to revisit as many times as needed. Outside of this, we also offer a monthly funding webinar. So, we talk about SBA loan qualifications. We talk through the rollover, the ROB strategy in depth. So you're always welcome to do that. And so that way, if things are, changing slightly, you can get the most up-to-date information. But no, just that it's a consultative conversation. And I'd love the opportunity to talk with anybody who's interested.
Awesome. And that invitation, I heard, is also open to the professional you're working with. Maybe it's your accountant that maybe is not as familiar with the ROBS plan. So I heard that invitation. I know that invitation was offered to a few candidates.
Yeah, no, it's not unusual that I do have somebody who says my financial advisor said that this is illegal and that there's taxes. And I'm like, nope, it's not. And if I need to talk to your financial advisor, I will, or somebody that has a CPA that's also not familiar. So it's not unusual if you have that, or if you just want them to be included. Again, it's as long of a process as it needs to be, and I'm happy to have those conversations with anybody, a financial advisor, CPA, accountant.
Yep, those are probably a few of my candidates, and I just for the record, just had lunch with a financial advisor in the area, and he was not aware of the ROBS plan, and so it was just eye-opening to him. Wow, that's interesting.
My financial advisor wasn't either. So I mean, I think it's one of those things. It's because in that strategy, there's you're choosing to invest it into your business, so you're the trustee and fiduciary fiduciary of the plan. Right. So there's typically not a financial advisor attached at that point. So that's, they're not really facilitating it. So that's why. But yeah, it's been around. It's not a loophole. Fran Fund didn't invent this program, nor did any other funding company, but it's actually part of the ERISA Act of 1974. And you can look it up in the IRS code, which is very boring and overwhelming to read, but it's there.
Well, you heard it from Tara. I was a financial advisor as well, and work with financial advisors. And I always said, never, ever touch retirement money, not realizing what was out there. I didn't even know about the Rob's plan when I started my first franchise in 2006 going into 2007. So it's looking back, it's like, wow, I was invested in whatever mutual fund my companies offer, but there's so many options I wish I knew about back then. So encourage everyone to explore it. Don't go crazy online. You can just give us a call. I can put you in touch with Tara. She can give you all that information, set up the first consultation, which may be a starting point for many. You don't have to have it all figured out in your companies, and you're going to have a certain date you're going to leave your job. Just put all your financials together. Tara, is it typically a 30-minute? What do you do as a
I offer 30, 45, and 60 just because some people know that they're coming in with a lot of questions, but 30 to 40 minutes is typically good enough.
Awesome. Well, Tara, I really, really appreciate it. We'll be hopefully probably 3 or 4 weeks. We'll have this online, and maybe I'll also send this out to everyone before contacting you, so they can get a little bit of an education on funding options, which is great. But I really do thank you for being on the show, and looking forward to hopefully seeing you in Nashville.
Yes. Well, thank you for Giuseppe. I appreciate you having me today, and happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks again.